Good afternoon. My name is James Knight, and this is my American Epidemic Opioid Addiction response to the documentary or video that we watched. First, I'd like to apologize. I tend to get a little long-winded when we're discussing things that I am passionate about. And so this video touched me in a number of different ways. One of the first ways it touched me is I have personally dealt with opioid addiction, not only with myself, but with also my mother and father. Both of my parents overdosed and died from an opiate addiction. And so this was a little personal as I watched this. Now, one of the biggest things that I think we need to remember is this video was shot in 2016. And so since 2016, we've seen nothing but the numbers of this opioid epidemic increase drastically. I've had an honor or privilege to be in the treatment field for the last 7 years, and in the treatment facility in which I work, I've been given the opportunity to teach the opioid overdose and harm reduction classes on numerous occasions. And so what I'll do is I'll break this video down kind of chronologically as it was presented to me, and kind of some thoughts that I went over in this video. And so the first part of this video, of course, was the fentanyl portion. So Joe was the gentleman's name that was suffering from the fentanyl addiction. His father tended to mention the huge changes that took place in Joe once he started to use fentanyl, and made a statement of how he was not himself, that he had become the devil, or there was a demon presiding over him. And you could just see the pain in the mother and the wife's eyes as they spoke about Joe and who he was and what he had become. He also spoke about the progression of his addiction, and he said he progressed from taking prescription pain pills to fentanyl, which is very common. I believe that there's approximately 80% of the people who use heroin or fentanyl first use some kind of prescription pain reliever. There was some statements in this portion, and it talked about New Hampshire. In 2014, there was 146 overdose deaths related to fentanyl, and in 2015, it had doubled to 283 deaths related to fentanyl. There was a more recent report by the New Hampshire Department of Justice that stated that in 2022, there was 463 deaths, and so we see how this just continues to increase. One of the big things that I really liked about the story of Joe and his family was the family tried different avenues to get Joe clean and sober, and how to do it effectively. They tried the tough love thing, and the father, he said it was the hardest thing he ever had to do. But I've always been told in recovery that, you baby the addict, you bury the addict, and there's a fine line between loving somebody and enabling them. We tend to love the addict, but we don't want to love the addict to death, right? And so we have to take a hard line there. She did mention, the mother did mention that she tried the tough love and kicked him out of the house, and by doing so, that it didn't help. That's what she said. It didn't help that he picked up charges. And what I want to say is normally charges or consequences are what we need to make lasting and long change in our lives. And as I watched this video progress, the only reason, or maybe not the only reason, but one of the main reasons that Joe was able to be clean and sober for the time being was of those consequences. He was on probation, that he was made accountable to an officer, where he had very firm expectations set in front of him. And so there was a very emotional side of this. I'm a spiritual person, and I truly believe that the hub of our disease is spirituality. And so there was a scene where Joe and his mother were sitting in church, and she broke down crying, and you could see in Joe's face he was doing the best he could not to cry, but he was struggling to hold back the tears, and you could see the impact that had on him in that moment. The next part of this video was the children, and that's something that is overlooked. Children are somewhat marginalized and don't have an opportunity to speak for themselves, and so really this was heart-wrenching to see this side of it. Not that I haven't seen it before, but it definitely brought to light some things that we tend to overlook. And so one of the first scenes was Michaela's mother when she was crying over the loss of her daughter and having to talk about not only her bearing her daughter, but also having to play this new role and have these new responsibilities and the burden of being these children's mother figure moving forward. It was mentioned numerous times with both stories in this section about the adverse childhood experiences and how that affects children from that point moving forward, and how big of a role that plays in their lives. Past trauma, past grief, abuse, neglect, all these things harm children psychologically, emotionally, and roll over into this PTSD, or all these manic behaviors that it was talking about, these mental health issues. The grandfather recognized this very well, and I was glad by that, to see the compassion that he had, and wanted to reduce all these adverse childhood experiences to the point that he was concerned that he would pass away before the children became of age, where they weren't so easily impacted. The next part of this was this title called The Radical Experiment, right? And this radical experiment is not so radical anymore. It's kind of standardized almost. They called it a pre-charge. A lot of it's been called diversion programs, drug court, but TAP programs, right? And Texas has this initiative where it's a Texas treatment against incarceration program. And so it's where a lot of people are getting second chances. And so normally on these programs that are set up, very strict, intensive treatments where they have a lot of accountability, a lot of expectations, and if they're able to accomplish these things, usually their charges are dismissed and no longer on their record, which gives them an opportunity to actually move forward in life without these barriers for employment and everything else that comes along with it. There was a stat in this one that really stood out to me, and it said there were 33,000 deaths in the United States in the opioids in 2015. And so I know in the class that I teach, the CDC put out a report in 2022, and it was talking about the year of 2021. And then in the year of 2021, on synthetic opioids alone, there was over 71,000 deaths. And so you can see how these number has drastically increased through the years, and will continue to increase unless something is being done about it. I truly believe that fentanyl is the biggest problem today, and it needs addressed. Now, one of the things that really blew me away about this radical experiment was, for some reason I can't remember his name, but when he still had the box full of paraphernalia, and it actually had drugs in it. When he said it hadn't been looked through in 10 months, and that really surprised me. That would have been the first thing that I got rid of. I'm not a guy who really likes to fight temptation. And with 8 years clean, I tend to remove myself from anything that would offer temptation. I truly believe that I'm powerless. But I choose to not put myself in those situations, and I was really proud of him for being able to walk through that. But I was also kind of skeptical, like he said. What if the camera wouldn't have been there when we went through that box? Would he have been able to face that temptation? Was that box just a reservation that he had for when maybe he completed drug court, that he could go out and do it again? Those are all concerns that were on my mind. Once again, it was only because of his consequences that he was getting clean and on the right track, that he was given this opportunity to do something about it. And so, we need consequences in our life. We need pain in our life. Those tend to be the major motivating factors for people that are getting clean and sober. And it's not until those things get big enough that we decide to make a difference. I think one of the biggest statements was towards the end of the movie, when it was the pretrial officer made a statement that she said, and I'll quote it here so I don't misquote it. It says, "One success is worth more than 20 failures." And I believe that, being in the treatment field, time and time again, I see people in the jail logs and people in the obituaries, but it's just that one that makes it, that changes his life, that changes his family's life, that changes the lives of everyone that it encounters, that does make it worth it. Now, why? And I think I kind of touched on this. One of the last questions was, why such a staggering opioid epidemic? And I believe it boils down to the pharmaceuticals. I believe that they started pressing these opioids onto the community as a safe drug, a non-addictive drug. They started on passing them out in abundance. And normally people that first started using prescription medications, in all my experience, it happened in one of two ways. Either a doctor prescribed them for some accident or injury that happened, earlier in life, or two, that they were rummaging around through their parents or grandparents, glove boxes or medicine cabinets, and they noticed this little pill bottle, and on the side of it said may cause drowsiness, and they decided to take it. It made them feel good, and so they continued to take it. Here recently, they've really cracked down on the prescription writing ability for these narcotics. And so in doing so, it has made people turn to illicit or illegally manufactured narcotics such as this heroin, such as fentanyl, such as these counterfeit fentanyl pills that they're calling oxys that are pressed and nothing more than fentanyl. And so this has created a major problem. And so this is why we get to have the conversation on a regular basis. Really enjoyed the film. Touched on some avenues that I needed to hear today. Sorry this was so long, but thank you for your time.